The sun streamed through the large bay windows of the Thompson estate, catching the polished surfaces and expensive decor that spoke of wealth and refinement. Charles Thompson, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, moved through the room with the ease of a man accustomed to authority. He shook hands with the few early guests who had arrived for the charity luncheon, his smile warm, his posture confident. To anyone looking in, he was the picture of success, a self-made businessman, admired and respected. Miranda Thompson, poised and radiant, floated among the guests, her laughter delicate, measured, and perfectly timed. She offered compliments and small talk, each word polished, each gesture flawless. The crowd adored her. The women admired her grace, the men admired her charm. Yet beneath her composed exterior, a subtle tension simmered. Her eyes flickered repeatedly toward Charles, noting a distant gaze. The brief tightening of his jaw when a conversation strayed too close to home. The couple exchanged glances, a ritual smile, a small nod, but there was a weight behind those gestures that no one else could see. Miranda's hand brushed against her husband's arm, a touch that seemed both affectionate and obligatory. In those quiet seconds, the cracks in their seemingly perfect marriage whispered just beneath the surface. Charles's attention occasionally drifted to his phone, notifications flashing quickly before he silenced them with practiced indifference. Miranda noticed, her lips tightening almost imperceptibly, a forced laugh escaping as she responded to a compliment from a guest. She had long since mastered the art of masking suspicion and discomfort with charm, a skill honed over years of careful observation. Guests chatted and mingled, oblivious to the subtle choreography of tension unfolding before them. Miranda's thoughts raced under the veil of civility. Every smile she offered, every nod of agreement was calculated, an exercise in maintaining appearances. She knew the truth of her home, the private frictions that lurked behind closed doors, yet the world outside remained blind. Charles, for his part, maintained a composed front. His influence and presence commanded respect, yet in fleeting moments his eyes betrayed fatigue and frustration. Miranda noticed these flashes but said nothing, smiling instead, offering reassurance through a seemingly innocent touch or soft words. By the time the luncheon wound down, the couple had navigated each interaction with precision, their public personas intact. But as the last guest departed, the brief intimacy of a shared glance revealed the reality that under the surface of perfection, deception, and hidden motives thrived. In that quiet, charged moment, the stage for the drama, the manipulation, and the inevitable betrayal was firmly set. Miranda had always understood the power of perception. A well-timed compliment, a gentle suggestion, a subtle expression of concern. These were the tools she wielded with precision. Over the past few weeks, she had begun inserting small seeds of doubt into Charles's consciousness. A misplaced document, a casually mentioned concern about a business associate, even offhand comments about friends' opinions, each carefully crafted to test his reactions, Charles noticed. He caught her in a few minor inconsistencies, an exaggerated story here, a small omission there, but he dismissed them. Perhaps it was love, perhaps a desire to preserve the flawless image of their marriage, but he chose to overlook them. To question Miranda now would risk shattering the veneer of perfection they had both cultivated for years. At dinner one evening, Miranda casually mentioned a rumor about a delayed contract that Charles had been managing. "I heard some concerns from the board," she said lightly, tilting her head with feigned innocence. Charles furrowed his brow, knowing the information was untrue, but he laughed it off, masking his irritation. Miranda smiled softly, the kind of smile that disarmed and reassured. Yet beneath it was a calculated edge. In social settings, she mirrored his movements, agreeing with his opinions while gently steering conversations in directions that benefited her subtle schemes. Friends and colleagues remained unaware, charmed by her warmth, never suspecting that the very woman who appeared devoted was already exerting influence over decisions and perceptions. The tension between them, though imperceptible to outsiders, thickened in private. Charles felt a vague unease he could not name. It gnawed at him, yet the fear of confrontation kept him silent. Miranda noticed his moments of hesitation, his fleeting looks of suspicion, and used them to her advantage. reinforcing the psychological imbalance between them. As days passed, Miranda's control became almost imperceptible yet undeniable. A misplaced key, a casual doubt cast on a business deal, a quiet critique of a friend's judgment, all subtle manipulations that eroded Charles's confidence while maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Her cunning nature, hidden behind charm and smiles, was beginning to shape the world around them. By the end of the week, Charles's trust wavered just enough for Miranda to notice. It was a small victory, barely visible to anyone else, but monumental in her strategy. The early signs of emotional control and manipulation were now firmly established, and the stage was set for the psychological games that would soon dominate their marriage. Miranda lingered in Charles's study long after he had left for a business meeting, the door clicking softly behind her. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and aged leather, but the air felt heavier now, laden with secrets. Her eyes swept across the neatly stacked papers, certificates, and family photos. Yet she knew that beneath the surface of order, hidden truths awaited. Carefully, she opened the top drawer of his antique desk, revealing a small envelope tucked behind a stack of mundane bills. Inside, she found bank statements for accounts she had never seen before, along with multiple insurance policies bearing Charles's name, each with significant sums listed as beneficiaries. Her pulse quickened. The financial empire she thought she had been married into was more complex and more valuable than she had realized. A plan began to form in her mind, dark and deliberate, each step meticulously considered. She closed the drawer silently, ensuring no trace of her intrusion remained. Her thoughts raced as she traced possibilities, how these accounts could be leveraged, how insurance policies might be used to her advantage. A thrill mingled with fear, a dangerous cocktail that made her aware of her own capacity for calculation. Miranda's charming exterior had always hidden an acute mind capable of strategy, and now that mind was fully engaged. Her reflection in the polished glass of the bookcase seemed almost mocking. Was she truly shocked by these discoveries, or had she been waiting for the opportunity to exploit them? The question lingered unanswered, yet it emboldened her. She imagined scenarios, rehearsed conversations, and considered the public spectacle she could stage if the need arose. Each thought nudged her closer to a line she had not yet crossed but felt inevitable. Every time the door opened or a sound echoed in the house, Miranda's heart skipped a beat. She reminded herself to remain outwardly composed, the devoted wife who trusted and loved her husband implicitly. Yet inwardly, the gears of strategy turned relentlessly. Charles's distractions and naivete became her tools. The cracks she had previously sown in his confidence now provided fertile ground for her plans. By the time Charles returned home, Miranda had constructed a silent map of the next months, how to maintain appearances while quietly maneuvering into a position of ultimate control. She smiled warmly at him as he stepped through the door, every gesture perfect, every word measured. Yet beneath that facade, her mind held secrets and intentions that could topple his world entirely. The danger in their home was no longer hypothetical. It had taken shape, and only Miranda knew its contours. Peter had known Charles for over 20 years, their friendship forged through shared business ventures and countless late-night discussions over strategy and trust. He had always admired Miranda as well, her elegance and composure earning nods of approval from friends and family alike. But lately, Peter's intuition had prickled uncomfortably. Small inconsistencies, glances that lingered too long, and subtle manipulations that only someone with a keen eye could spot had set off alarms in his mind. One evening, he arrived unannounced at the Skeel residence, claiming to check on Charles after a long day of meetings. Miranda greeted him with her signature warm smile, though Peter sensed a practiced edge beneath it. She poured drinks with effortless grace, maintaining eye contact and soft laughter that belied the tension in the room. Peter attempted casual conversation, probing lightly, noting how she twisted the subject whenever Charles's name arose, deflecting questions and redirecting praise toward herself. "You've been awfully busy lately," Peter said, watching for signs of nervousness. "Charles seems distracted too, doesn't he?" Miranda's smile widened, a subtle tilt of her head designed to charm and disarm. "Oh, Peter, Charles is simply under more pressure at work. You know how demanding his projects can be. I just try to keep things calm at home for him," she replied, her voice a melodic shield against suspicion. She leaned slightly closer, letting her perfume fill the space between them, an unconscious tactic to regain dominance in the conversation. Peter hesitated, unconvinced, sensing the subtle manipulations. He noticed the fleeting flash of irritation in her eyes when he pressed further, the smallest shift that revealed she was calculating every word. The woman he had admired as charming and supportive suddenly appeared as something far more complex, capable, intelligent, and potentially dangerous. Every gesture, every laugh seemed designed to maintain control, to bend perception, to keep others from seeing the true intentions lurking beneath her surface. He left that evening troubled, unsure whether to confront Charles, investigate further, or watch silently as events unfolded. Miranda waved from the doorway, maintaining her innocent facade, but Peter's mind replayed each interaction like a puzzle. The friend who once trusted the couple completely now found himself questioning the narrative he had once accepted. The tension between loyalty and suspicion began to build, and Peter's role as an observer, or obstacle, loomed large over Miranda's carefully laid plans. By the time the door closed behind him, Miranda allowed herself a quiet smile, thinking of how effortlessly she could manipulate perceptions, even those closest to Charles. The stakes were rising, and anyone who threatened to disrupt her carefully orchestrated game was now a potential target. Peter's doubts would not go unnoticed, and Miranda knew she had to be prepared. The psychological chessboard had expanded, and the next moves were hers to command. Miranda had always known the power of words and gestures, and now she wielded them with precise intent. Every conversation with Charles became a subtle battlefield. She questioned his memory, dismissed his concerns, and reframed events to make him doubt his own judgment. A misplaced document or a forgotten appointment became evidence of his inattentiveness, carefully catalogued in her mind to chip away at his confidence. "You're imagining things again," she would say softly, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. Her touch felt warm, but beneath it lay manipulation. "I just want what's best for us, Charles. You've been so stressed lately. Worry about you." Her eyes shimmered with concern, yet the effect was insidious. Charles began second-guessing himself, unsure whether he was overreacting or genuinely losing touch with reality. Friends who once dropped by now heard subtle excuses. Charles needed rest or wasn't feeling well. Miranda painted a picture of a devoted husband overwhelmed by work, spinning narratives that isolated him further. She discouraged visits from Peter, citing imagined tensions or concerns about privacy. Each refusal of a friendly gesture was framed as protection, but in truth, it tightened her control. At home, Miranda orchestrated minor disruptions, misplaced keys, missed calls, or forgotten meetings. Charles would spend hours retracing his steps, apologizing for errors he did not commit. Miranda's voice remained gentle, her smile unwavering, yet the cracks in his self-assurance widened daily. The house felt smaller, suffocating, each room a reminder of her psychological grip. By night, Miranda would sit alone in their study, reviewing her careful strategies, plotting the next phase of her manipulation. Every action reinforced her control, every conversation a test of his loyalty and stability. The balance of power had shifted entirely. Charles was no longer just her husband. He was a pawn in a game only she understood. The isolation intensified, but Miranda's charm outside the home remained flawless. Friends and colleagues continued to admire the couple, unaware of the storm brewing behind closed doors. This duality strengthened her position, making it nearly impossible for Charles to find allies or escape her influence. Psychological domination, disguised as love and concern, had become the invisible prison walls that bound him. As the chapter closes, the stage is set for the next escalation. Miranda's control is complete, but the tension simmers, hinting that the next confrontation could erupt into irreversible consequences. The silent battle between manipulation and the remaining sparks of Charles's awareness looms over every interaction, preparing the reader for the looming tragedy. Miranda moved with quiet determination, her mind meticulously dissecting every aspect of her husband's routine. Each morning she observed Charles's habits, the way he brewed his coffee, the time he left for the office, the precise order in which he signed his documents. Every nuance became a puzzle piece in her plan. She recorded schedules on discrete notepads, memorized security camera angles, and analyzed his digital habits, noting which friends or colleagues he spoke with most frequently. Knowledge, she reasoned, would be her shield. She began researching poisons under the guise of a cooking experiment, scrutinizing their effects, time frames, and detectability. She considered slow-acting substances that would appear natural, giving her ample time to craft an alibi. Books, online forums, and chemical manuals became her clandestine curriculum. Every scenario was calculated. If Charles took a sip too early, if a friend visited unexpectedly, if his body reacted unpredictably, nothing was left to chance. Alibis were another critical component. Miranda rehearsed casual outings with friends, timed her errands, and documented potential witnesses. Her charm became an accomplice. Casual smiles, light laughter, and social invitations would reinforce her innocence. Even digital footprints were carefully curated. Phone calls were staged, messages drafted and sent in advance, every element orchestrated to maintain her unassailable image as a loving, unsuspecting wife. Yet her brilliance carried a sinister calm. At night, she reviewed security footage from their home, noting blind spots and assessing potential complications. Charles's presence in certain rooms, the location of personal items, and the timing of deliveries all factored into her strategy. Miranda imagined contingencies, preparing mental scripts for every eventuality. Each day blurred into precise, methodical preparation, leaving no space for doubt or error. Despite the meticulous planning, she maintained her outward role flawlessly. Charles remained oblivious, greeting her with trust and warmth, unaware of the dark calculations unfolding around him. Friends and neighbors saw the same charming woman they had always admired, never suspecting that behind her bright smile, she plotted a crime with surgical precision. Miranda's duality was perfected. Public innocence and private malevolence existed side by side. The contrast sharp and chilling. The tension between appearances and reality mounted with every passing day. Each small victory, an unnoticed observation, a successful rehearsal, tightened the invisible grip she held over the future. Every detail she perfected brought her closer to execution, each step a cold prelude to the ultimate act. As the chapter closes, the reader senses that the inevitable moment is near. The stage is meticulously set, and Charles remains blind to the storm Miranda is orchestrating, making the forthcoming confrontation both shocking and tragically inevitable. Peter, Charles's longtime friend, couldn't ignore the subtle changes anymore. Late nights at the office, unexplained fatigue and sudden headaches painted a worrying picture. He voiced concerns casually at first, mentioning them to mutual acquaintances, but the pattern grew impossible to dismiss. Meanwhile, Detective Lawson, an old college friend of Peter, began noticing discrepancies in Charles's statements and daily routines. The man who once seemed invincible was showing cracks, and each tiny irregularity fueled their curiosity. Miranda, aware of their scrutiny, performed flawlessly. Her laughter was light, her gaze sympathetic, her gestures tender. "I don't understand what's happening," she would whisper, her voice trembling just enough to suggest worry rather than deception. To outsiders, she was the devoted wife, perched at the edge of her husband's hospital bed, offering comfort, cooking his favorite meals, and checking his vitals. Yet beneath the polished demeanor, she subtly planted seeds of doubt, a misplaced glass here, a doctored message there, small manipulations that would divert suspicion away from herself. Charles, weakened by the mysterious ailments she administered, became increasingly dependent on her. He confided more, mentioning fatigue, dizziness, and occasional blackouts. Miranda's responses were measured, a delicate balance of concern and reassurance. She suggested rest, arranged doctor's appointments, and carefully guided conversations away from questions she couldn't yet answer. Her control over the narrative tightened with every passing day. Peter, persistent and concerned, began keeping notes, times, incidents, and minor anomalies in Charles's behavior. He spoke to Detective Lawson privately, sharing patterns that seemed coincidental, but together painted a disturbing picture. The detective, methodical and skeptical, began planning discreet observations, interviews, and inquiries. Their approach was careful, knowing the domestic sphere was often shielded from outside eyes. Miranda's internal calculations were relentless. Every visitor's perception, every conversation, every minor change in Charles's health became a piece of her strategic puzzle. She memorized the detective's habits, Peter's mannerisms, and even the timing of routine medical checkups. Each detail allowed her to anticipate questions, cover evidence, and maintain her performance. The tension of the household became palpable. Every smile carried hidden intent. Every gesture was layered with deception. By the end of the chapter, the stakes had escalated dramatically. Suspicion had risen not only among Charles's closest friends, but also within law enforcement. Yet Miranda remained unshaken outwardly, the embodiment of innocence, while the web she had spun tightened invisibly around everyone. The reader senses the impending culmination, every calculated step bringing her closer to execution, every observer edging nearer to the truth. The stage is set for the inevitable clash between cunning and justice. The evening began like any other, with the soft hum of the city outside and the warm glow of lamplight spilling across the living room. Charles sat in his favorite armchair, oblivious to the precise orchestration of the night's events. Miranda moved with deliberate calm, her expression serene yet meticulously controlled. Every gesture had been rehearsed, every pause measured. The poison she had prepared weeks earlier was now subtly integrated into his evening drink, a silent agent of her design. Charles took a sip, complimenting her on the flavor, unaware of the danger he was consuming. His words were casual, almost tender, and it only strengthened her resolve. Miranda smiled faintly, nodding, allowing herself the smallest flicker of satisfaction. She had meticulously timed everything. The medicine, his dinner, the lighting, even the soft music playing in the background to mask any unusual sounds. Each element was a piece of a carefully crafted illusion. Moments passed. Charles began coughing, then clutching his chest, a sudden grimace cutting across his face. Miranda's carefully constructed performance shifted instantly from serene hostess to terrified wife. "Charles, oh my God, what's happening?" she cried, her voice trembling just enough to suggest genuine panic. She knelt beside him, pressing her hand lightly against his shoulder, careful not to reveal the small syringe she had hidden moments before. Every movement was a delicate balance, helpful yet controlled, as if she were merely trying to save him. The atmosphere in the room grew tense and cinematic. Furniture was scattered slightly to suggest struggle, and a few strategically placed objects hinted at her frantic attempts to aid him. She called emergency services, her voice cracking as she delivered the panicked account. "My husband. He's collapsing. Please hurry." She kept her tone desperate, allowing the operator to feel the urgency of the scene. Every second was choreographed, her grief performative yet convincing. Charles fell to the floor, gasping, his eyes searching hers. Miranda leaned over him, murmuring soft words of comfort, a delicate mixture of love and fear. She ensured that each motion, each tear was observed, mentally logging the impression she was leaving for the arriving paramedics. Her mind worked rapidly, monitoring the narrative, anticipating questions, and controlling the impressions of any witnesses. By the time first responders arrived, Miranda's performance was flawless. Her hands shook, her voice quivered, and the fear in her eyes was palpable. Yet beneath the surface, the calculation remained unbroken. The plan executed with precision. The crime scene told a story of tragic collapse, accidental misfortune, and devoted care, while in reality, every element had been manipulated to ensure both her advantage and the preservation of her innocence. As paramedics worked on Charles, the tension between outward shock and internal cold calculation reached its peak. Miranda whispered faint reassurances, comforting him, all while silently noting every detail that could later support her alibi. The reader witnesses a chilling juxtaposition, the chaotic urgency of a household in crisis against the meticulous orchestration of a crime carried out under the guise of love. The fatal night concluded with Charles's life slipping away, and Miranda's deception perfectly poised to continue in the aftermath. The morning after Charles's collapse was eerily quiet, the house still heavy with the tension of the previous night. Detectives arrived promptly, their presence bringing an immediate sense of pressure. Miranda met them at the door, her expression carefully constructed, pale, anxious, shocked. She led them inside, recounting the events in a trembling voice, emphasizing her frantic attempts to save her husband. Every word was measured, every pause deliberately timed to convey panic and helplessness. As the investigators moved through the house, subtle inconsistencies began to catch their attention. The kitchen, for instance, was unusually tidy for a night of apparent chaos. No overturned chairs, no scattered belongings beyond what Miranda allowed them to see. One detective noted a missing prescription bottle, a minor detail that seemed inconsequential, but planted the seed of doubt. Another noticed her glances toward the study, brief but calculating, hinting at awareness that went beyond simple grief. Miranda answered questions carefully, her tone soft, her body language conveying vulnerability. "I don't understand what happened," she whispered repeatedly, tilting her head in anguish, a believable display of concern. Yet beneath her facade, she mentally catalogued the investigators' reactions, noting the angles from which they viewed her, predicting their next steps, and preparing subtle misdirections. She was a master at blending grief with calculated deflection. Outside the immediate chaos, digital clues began to surface. Texts sent in the early hours, innocuous at first glance, hinted at coordination or premeditation. Investigators flagged them for later analysis, but Miranda remained calm, offering explanations that seemed plausible on the surface. Reminders to colleagues, casual chatter, or routine inquiries. Every statement she made was designed to fit a narrative of innocence, though the detectives' trained eyes caught the slight contradictions. As interviews progressed, friends and neighbors contributed their observations. Many spoke of Miranda's devotion, her tearful cries, her apparent shock at the tragedy. Yet a few subtle comments, a raised eyebrow here, a hesitant pause there, suggested that not all was as it seemed. The detectives began piecing together a timeline, cross-referencing statements and noting deviations. Miranda's confidence began to face its first cracks under the methodical scrutiny. Despite the growing pressure, she maintained her performance, alternating between grief-stricken gestures and careful, plausible explanations. Her voice trembled when recalling Charles's collapse, and she clutched his favorite blanket for comfort. Yet inside, she remained acutely aware of every move, every observation. The investigation had begun to probe deeper than she anticipated, and the careful structure of her plan faced its first real challenge. By the end of the day, detectives left with more questions than answers. Miranda's act was convincing, but subtle hints, a missing prescription, unusual texts, fleeting inconsistencies, would ensure they remained suspicious. The tension was palpable, and the story set the stage for the next phase, the unraveling of her perfectly orchestrated crime. Miranda arrived at the questioning room with carefully measured steps, her face pale and trembling, hands clutching a handkerchief. To the investigators, she was the perfect picture of grief, a widow shattered by tragedy, haunted by the loss of a loving husband. Each word she spoke was deliberate, her pauses and gasps timed to elicit sympathy. She recounted the evening, weaving emotion into every sentence, emphasizing her panic and desperation while hiding the meticulous planning behind Charles's death. Inside her mind, however, the narrative was entirely different. Pride surged through her at the effectiveness of her act, each tear and quivering lip a weapon in her psychological arsenal. Guilt flickered briefly, an acknowledgement of the blood on her hands, but she quickly pushed it aside, replacing it with the thrill of having orchestrated an event so flawlessly that no one could yet see the truth. Every interaction became a chess game, each investigator and attorney merely pieces to manipulate. Friends and family who arrived to offer condolences were equally ensnared in her performance. She embraced them, whispered fragile assurances, and shared selective memories of Charles, reinforcing her image as the devastated spouse. But privately, she catalogued their behaviors, noting who might question her too closely. who might observe the inconsistencies in her story. The duality of her existence, the public widow and private orchestrator, was intoxicating, yet stressful. During interviews with the detectives, she subtly redirected their attention, emphasizing small contradictions in witness statements while presenting herself as frail and shaken. She feigned confusion at minor details, pretending to misremember innocuous events, all while internally critiquing their every move. Her ability to maintain composure, even under direct scrutiny, gave her a dangerous sense of control. Yet even as she controlled the room, doubt lingered. She sensed how close the investigators were to noticing cracks, tiny, almost imperceptible shifts in her narrative, but she refused to falter. Each calculated gesture, each strategic pause served to strengthen her illusion. The tension between her outer display of vulnerability and inner satisfaction created a suspenseful psychological landscape, one of deception, manipulation, and the constant threat of discovery. By the end of the day, Miranda had managed to maintain the facade, leaving investigators intrigued, suspicious but without concrete evidence. Privately, she reveled in the thrill of the game, knowing that every lie she told had the power to manipulate reality itself. The stage was set for the next confrontation, where her ultimate challenge, the legal system, would test her ability to control perception and evade justice. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Miranda entered. Dressed in muted gray, her face a mask of solemn composure. Journalists whispered, cameras clicked, and jurors shifted in their seats. Every eye was on her, yet she exuded the calm control that had defined her life. Her attorney guided her to the stand, reminding her of each carefully rehearsed response. Every glance, every nod, every faint tremor had been meticulously planned for maximum effect. The prosecution wasted no time. They presented witness after witness, Peter recounting the subtle manipulations he had observed, financial experts detailing suspicious transactions, and medical personnel noting Charles's unexplained health incidents. Each revelation painted Miranda as calculating, cunning, and unrepentant. Yet when she spoke, her voice trembled just enough. Her tears fell at precisely the right moment, and jurors hesitated. Was she a cold-hearted murderer, or a devastated wife ensnared in circumstances beyond her control? Inside her mind, Miranda analyzed every reaction. The jurors' frowns, the attorney's furrowed brows, the detective's sharp eyes. All were pieces on a chessboard she had learned to manipulate long ago. Pride surged through her. Even under the most intense scrutiny, she maintained control of the narrative. She remembered the hours of planning, the meticulous execution, and the thrill of deception. Guilt flickered, but she shoved it aside, replaced by adrenaline and the art of performance. During cross-examinations, her composure was tested. The prosecutor questioned her about inconsistencies, her private interactions with Charles, and the moments leading up to his death. Miranda's answers were precise, carefully balancing truth and concealment. Her charm remained potent, softening accusations and creating doubt. Even the strongest witnesses faltered when confronted with her disarming presence and carefully timed emotional responses. Outside the courtroom, the press speculated endlessly, debating morality and justice. Inside, Miranda's dual life, widow and orchestrator, played out in real time, her inner thrill hidden behind perfectly sculpted sorrow. Each testimony, each piece of evidence, heightened the tension between exposure and survival. Her psychological games now extended to the jury, who found themselves torn between sympathy and suspicion, a moral labyrinth constructed by her own hands. As the day drew to a close, Miranda left the stand seemingly fragile, but internally triumphant. She had navigated another round of scrutiny, but the verdict loomed, a culmination of suspense, deception, and psychological mastery. The courtroom drama was far from over, and every glance, every whispered comment, reminded her that the next steps could either cement her freedom or unravel her intricate facade. The courtroom was tense as the judge read the verdict. Miranda sat motionless, her hands folded neatly on her lap, eyes trained on the floor. Every word hung in the air like a weight, the silence broken only by the soft shuffle of papers and distant murmurs. Guilty. The word reverberated through the room, confirming the culmination of years of manipulation, deceit, and murder. Friends, family, and acquaintances absorbed the truth with a mixture of shock, sorrow, and disbelief. How could someone so charming orchestrate such horrors? Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Cameras flashed, and microphones jostled for position, capturing the public spectacle of a private nightmare revealed. Miranda, led by officers, maintained her composed facade, her face betraying only a trace of sorrow. Inside, her mind raced, not with fear of punishment, but with calculations, regrets, and faint pangs of guilt she had long suppressed. Every detail of her plan, every act of deception now lay exposed, leaving her legacy of control shattered. Friends and family struggled with the emotional aftermath. Peter, who had quietly observed Miranda's early manipulations, wrestled with relief and lingering doubt. The community grappled with betrayal on multiple levels. The husband they mourned, the wife they admired, and the thin line separating appearances from reality. Conversations buzzed with questions. How did no one notice? How could charm conceal cruelty? The complexity of human relationships, the subtle interplay of trust and manipulation, weighed heavily on everyone involved. For the authorities, the case became a textbook example of psychological deception. Detectives reflected on the subtle clues they had pieced together, the careful gaslighting, the staged grief, and the meticulous planning. Each revelation served as a cautionary tale. Appearances are often deceiving, and evil can wear the mask of perfection. The courtroom drama had ended, but the lessons persisted, echoing through the halls of justice and beyond. Miranda's sentence was handed down, years of incarceration, restitution, and monitoring. Yet the most enduring consequence was not the legal penalty. It was the psychological and emotional aftermath. Every friend, every family member, every observer carried fragments of trauma, betrayal, and mistrust. Miranda's actions had left invisible scars that time alone would struggle to heal. The story's closure was marked not by relief, but by reflection on the fragility of trust and the darkness that can lurk behind even the most elegant facades. As the sun set over the city, a sense of grim finality settled in. The law had spoken. Justice had been delivered. Yet the echoes of deceit remained in whispered conversations, haunted memories, and uneasy silences. Miranda would serve her sentence, but the emotional and psychological imprint of her crimes would linger in the lives she had touched. The tale of manipulation, ambition, and the deadly intersection of love and power closed with a stark reminder. Evil often hides in plain sight, and human relationships are far more fragile than they appear.